A man kneels beside a low wooden bed in a villa on the western bank of the Nile. The walls are painted with blue lotus and gold reeds. The ceiling above him is striped like the wings of a falcon, like the wings of Horus, the god of kings, the god of his king. On the bed lies a boy, 7 years old, maybe 8. The boy has his father's nose and his mother's eyes, and tonight he is wearing the linen shirt the seamstress finished only this morning. Tomorrow he will wear it again, because tomorrow is the first day his tutor will teach him the names of the gods in writing, and a future heir of the household must look like a future heir of the household. The boy is tired. His father is whispering. He is telling him about Ra, who rolls the sun across the sky like a beetle rolls a ball of dung. About Hapi, who feeds the Nile from the secret cavern under the southern cataracts. About Horus, whose right eye is the sun, and whose left eye is the moon, and whose face he will wear one day, when he is grown, when the household passes into his hands. He kisses the boy on the forehead. He blows out the oil lamp. He walks down the long corridor to the inner courtyard, and he does not know, he could not possibly know, that in a few weeks' time, at midnight, on a date he has not yet circled, a cry will go up out of his house that will be heard from the delta to the desert. He does not know that the boy he just kissed is on a list. We will come back to that boy. But not yet. Because before midnight, the gods of Egypt have to die. If you grew up in church, you may think you know this story. I want you to look at it again. This is not a story about frogs. This is not a story about bugs. This is not a story about a stubborn king who would not listen to a stuttering shepherd. This is a story about a courtroom, and 10 gods on trial, and a verdict. You have probably heard, somewhere along the way, the list of the 10 plagues. You may have learned it as a child in a felt board Sunday school. Blood, frogs, the gnats, flies, livestock, boils, hail, locusts, darkness, death. What you may not have been told is that each of those 10 plagues, every single one of them, was a precision strike against a specific Egyptian god called out by name. The Hebrew word for plague in the book of Exodus is maggephah. It does not mean disaster. It means a blow, a strike, a punch landed exactly where it was aimed. And by the time the 10th strike lands, every god of Egypt will be dead, and so will every firstborn son in the country. Before the first plague hits, you need to see who is walking into Pharaoh's throne room. His name is Moses. He is 80 years old. His beard is white. His hands shake a little because he has spent the last 40 years on the backside of a desert in Midian, herding sheep for his father-in-law and trying very hard not to be found by anyone in Egypt, because the last time he was in Egypt, he killed a man. But Moses was not raised in a sheep tent. Moses was raised in a palace, Pharaoh's palace. He was nursed by his own Hebrew mother, but he was educated by the priests of Egypt. The book of Acts tells you he was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians. And here is what nobody mentions in the children's books. That wisdom included the names of every god in the Egyptian pantheon, their domains, their festivals, their weaknesses. When Moses walks into Pharaoh's throne room and raises his shepherd's staff, he is not a country preacher who got handed a microphone. He is an insider. He knows exactly which gods he is about to humiliate, in what order and why. Beside him stands his older brother, Aaron. Aaron is 83. Aaron does the talking. Because Moses has a stutter, he throws down the staff. It becomes a serpent. The cobra was the symbol on Pharaoh's own crown. The uraeus, the rearing snake of royal authority. The first miracle in the throne room is already a message. Yahweh has just thrown your crown on the floor. Pharaoh does not flinch. He calls in his court magicians. Their names, according to the Apostle Paul writing to Timothy centuries later, were Jannes and Jambres. They throw down their own staffs. Their staffs become serpents too. Pharaoh smiles. 2 can play this game. Then Moses' serpent eats their serpents. And Pharaoh stops smiling. But he does not let the Hebrews go. Here's what most people miss. Yahweh does not have to do any of this. He could have parted the Red Sea on day 1. He could have lifted his people out by a whirlwind. He has chosen a slower path, a courtroom path, because he is going to use the next several weeks to demonstrate publicly and undeniably that every god the Egyptians have ever worshipped is a fraud. The plagues are a closing argument. Pharaoh is the defendant, and the whole world is in the gallery. Plague 1. The Nile. The Nile is not a river to the Egyptians. The Nile is a god. 3 gods, actually. Hapi is the spirit of its flooding. Hanum is the guardian of its source, and the body of Osiris, the god of the dead, was believed to be buried somewhere beneath its current. To an Egyptian, the Nile is not water. It is divine bloodstream. Moses meets Pharaoh on the riverbank in the morning, while Pharaoh is performing his daily ritual to the river. Imagine the timing. Imagine the audacity. Moses raises the staff. Aaron stretches it over the water. And in front of Pharaoh, in the middle of his own ceremony, the Nile turns to blood. The fish die. The smell rises. For 7 days, Egypt cannot drink. They dig little wells in the sand, beside the riverbanks, just to find filtered water. Hapi is silent. Khnum is silent. Osiris is silent. Pharaoh's magicians do manage, somehow, to turn a small basin of water red. So Pharaoh tells himself this is a trick. He goes back into his palace. Plague 2. The frogs. Now we have to talk about a goddess named Heqet. Heqet had the head of a frog and the body of a woman. She was the goddess of fertility and childbirth. Egyptian women wore little frog-shaped amulets around their necks when they went into labor. The frog was so sacred in Egypt that to kill one, even by accident, could carry a penalty. The frog was the goddess, and now the frogs are everywhere. Imagine your own kitchen this morning. Now imagine it full of frogs. In the bread bowl, in the kettle, on the table where your children eat. That is the morning every Egyptian mother woke up to. They are in the kneading bowls. They are in the beds where children are sleeping. They are climbing the legs of the throne. They are in the ovens. They are in the wine jars. Pharaoh wakes up and there are frogs on his pillow. He calls Moses. He begs, "Take them away." Moses prays. The frogs die, all of them. At once, the Egyptians pile them in heaps across the country. The land stinks for days. The goddess of fertility has become a stench in her own country. But the moment Pharaoh sees relief, his heart hardens again. But it gets stranger. Plague 3. The gnats. Aaron stretches the staff and strikes the dust of the ground. And the dust itself becomes gnats. Tiny, biting, swarming gnats that cover every living thing in Egypt. Every man, every animal, every priest in every temple. This is a strike at Geb, the god of the earth. The Egyptians believed the dust beneath their feet was holy ground, the body of Geb himself. Their priests had to maintain ceremonial purity to perform their rituals. If you were a priest of Egypt, a single gnat landing on your robe meant your ritual was void. Now you have them in your beard, in your eyes. The entire priesthood of Egypt has been ritually disqualified all at once on the same morning. Jannes and Jambres try to copy the miracle. They cannot. The dust they strike stays dust. And for the first time in their lives, the most powerful magicians in Egypt turn to Pharaoh and say 6 words I want you to hear, because they come from the mouths of men who have spent their entire careers defending the Egyptian gods. This is the finger of God, not the arm, not the hand, the finger, the smallest part. The implication is terrifying. If this is what God's finger can do, what is God's hand going to do? Pharaoh does not answer them. He turns and walks back into his palace. 3 plagues down, 7 to go. And we have not even gotten to the part where Pharaoh's own son dies in his arms. Pause with me for a moment, because if you have never noticed this pattern before, you are about to miss what makes it brilliant. These plagues are not random. They are not escalating just because God is angry. They are walking in order through the Egyptian pantheon, from the river god to the fertility goddess to the earth god, and they are knocking each one off the shelf, one by one, in front of the entire ancient world. And we are only on plague 3. If you are tracking this for the first time, you are not alone. Most of us were handed this story as a list. Nobody handed us the courtroom. So if you want more of the Bible explained the way it was actually written, with the gods named, with the patterns visible, with the weight of it intact, the subscribe button right under this video is how you tell me to keep going. It costs you nothing. It tells me everything. Now back to Egypt, because the next 4 plagues are where the empire begins to crack. Plague 4, the flies. Egyptian religion had a god named Khepri. Khepri had the head of a scarab beetle and the body of a man, and he was the god of creation, of rebirth, of the rising sun. If you were an Egyptian, you carried Khepri in your pocket your whole life. Every Egyptian wore a scarab amulet at some point. They believed Khepri rolled the sun across the sky, the way a beetle rolls a ball of dung. He was the god of life beginning every morning. And now the swarms come. The Hebrew text is not specific about the species. It just says swarms. Thick, biting, suffocating swarms that fill the houses, the temples, the granaries, the throne room. The God of creation has produced the creatures that are now devouring the country. And this is where it gets remarkable. For the first time in the narrative, God draws a line on the map. He tells Moses that in the land of Goshen, the eastern delta where the Hebrews live, there will not be a single fly. Egypt is choking on insects. Goshen is silent and clean. The same sun is overhead. The same air is moving. But the boundary is absolute. Pharaoh notices. He calls Moses and offers a compromise. Worship your God, he says, but stay inside Egypt. Moses says no. The compromise is rejected. Pharaoh pretends to relent. The flies leave. The moment they leave, Pharaoh hardens his heart again. Plague 5. The livestock. The cow was sacred to Hathor, the goddess of love, of motherhood, of music. She was depicted with a cow's head or with cow's horns on a human face. And the bull. The bull was worshipped at Memphis as Apis, an actual living animal kept in a temple, fed by priests, mummified at death and replaced by the next bull the priests identified as Apis incarnate. The livestock of Egypt collapse in the fields. Cattle, horses, donkeys, camels, sheep. They go down in a single day. If you owned cattle, you woke up to find the animals you fed yesterday lying dead in the field. The text says all the livestock of the Egyptians died. The animals that pulled the plows and carried the soldiers and produced the milk, gone in 24 hours. Pharaoh sends servants to check the land of Goshen. Not a single Hebrew animal is dead. Not one. Pharaoh does not let the people go. Plague 6. The boils. Moses and Aaron take handfuls of soot from a brick kiln. The very kilns where Hebrew slaves had been forced to make bricks without straw. And Moses throws the soot into the air toward heaven. The soot becomes fine dust, and wherever the dust lands, painful boils break out on the skin of every Egyptian and every Egyptian animal. This is a strike at 2 gods at once. Isis was the goddess of medicine, the one Egyptians prayed to for healing. Sekhmet was the lion-headed goddess of disease, the one they prayed to for protection from epidemics. Both gods have failed in the same hour. There is no relief. There is no healing. Stay with me, because this is the moment the priesthood breaks completely. The book of Exodus says that the magicians could not stand before Moses because of the boils. The same Jannes and Jambres who had matched the first 2 plagues, who had tried and failed on the third, are now too disfigured to even appear in court. If you were one of those court magicians, your skin is now too disfigured for you to even appear in public. They disappear from the rest of the story. They are never mentioned again. The professional defenders of Egyptian religion have been physically removed from the room. Plague 7. The hail and the fire. This is the moment the sky itself turns against Egypt. The sky was the goddess nut, stretched across the heavens, her body forming the dome of the world. The storm god was Set, who was supposed to control wind and weather. Air god was Shu, who held Nut up off the earth. 3 sky gods, all of them in charge of what is about to fall on Egypt's head. And what falls is not just hail. The Hebrew text says it was hail mixed with fire. Lightning running along the ground, mingled with hailstones the size of fists. If you were an Egyptian farmer, you watched a year of work die in 20 minutes. Crops are flattened. Trees are split. Anything left alive in the fields after Plague 5 is destroyed. But notice what is happening inside the Egyptian court. For the first time, the text says that some of Pharaoh's own servants believed Moses when God warned that the hail was coming. Those who feared the word of the Lord brought their servants and their cattle indoors. The Egyptians, plural, believing. The Jewish historian Josephus, writing about these events in his Antiquities of the Jews, says that by this point even the priests of Egypt admitted privately that what was happening was beyond any natural explanation. If you were one of Pharaoh's officials, you started to wonder whether your king was about to lose your country. The empire is cracking from the inside. Pharaoh did not lack evidence. Pharaoh did not lack warning. Pharaoh did not lack mercy. Pharaoh lacked surrender. And there are still 3 plagues to go. Plague 8, the locusts. You may not have heard of the god Sennacherib. Most people have not. Sennacherib was a minor deity in the Egyptian pantheon, but he had one very specific job. Sennacherib was the god you prayed to for protection from locusts. He had the head of a locust himself. Farmers across Egypt carried his image into the fields. They left offerings at his shrines. He was the insurance policy of the Egyptian harvest. Now Moses stretches the staff over the land, and a wind blows from the east for an entire day and an entire night. By morning, the locusts arrive. The book of Exodus says there had never been such a swarm before, and there would never be such a swarm again. They cover the face of the ground until the ground cannot be seen. They eat everything the hail had spared, every leaf, every stalk, every fruit on every tree. By the time they finish, there is not a green thing left in all of Egypt. This time, it is not the magicians who beg. It is Pharaoh's own officials. They walk into the throne room and they say, plainly, "How long will this man be a snare to us? Let the people go." Egypt is destroyed. Pharaoh almost relents. He offers to let the men go, but not the women and children. Moses refuses. The locusts stay. And then, just as suddenly as they came, a wind from the opposite direction lifts them all into the Red Sea. Pharaoh hardens his heart. Plague 9, the darkness. Pay attention to this one, because Plague 9 is not just another plague. Plague 9 is the beheading of the Egyptian religion. The supreme god of Egypt was Ra. Ra was the sun. Pharaoh was called the son of Ra. The entire identity of the Egyptian throne, the entire theology of Egyptian kingship, the entire calendar, the entire harvest cycle, the entire afterlife. All of it ran on the sun. Ra was not one god among many. Ra was the head of the pantheon. He was the god above the gods. Moses stretches the staff toward heaven, and for 3 days, the sun does not rise. The book of Exodus uses a phrase that is hard to translate. It says the darkness could be felt. Not seen, felt, a heavy, suffocating, physical darkness that pressed against the skin. Egyptians could not see one another. They could not rise from where they sat. For 3 full days, an entire nation was frozen in place inside their own homes, unable to perform a single ritual, unable to light a single torch that did any good, unable to even find each other in the dark. But in the land of Goshen, the Hebrew children had light. Ra had been silenced. The supreme god of Egypt could not even rise. Pharaoh calls Moses one last time. He is furious. He tells Moses he will kill him if he ever sees his face again. Moses says, "You have spoken well. I will not see your face again." And he walks out. Here's the part nobody tells you. When Moses walks out of that throne room, the verdict has already been written. The gods have all been tried. They've all been found guilty. There is only one defendant left in the courtroom, and his name is Pharaoh. Plague 10. The death of the firstborn. Every one of the previous 9 plagues had been an attack on a god in a temple. The 10th plague is different. The 10th plague is an attack on the god sitting on the throne. Pharaoh, in Egyptian theology, was not a man who served the gods. Pharaoh was a god himself, the living incarnation of Horus while he reigned, destined to become Osiris when he died. And his firstborn son was not just a prince. His firstborn son was the future god of Egypt. The divine line ran from father to son. The crown was the crown of a divine dynasty. Yahweh announces, through Moses, that at midnight he himself will go through the land of Egypt and every firstborn in the land. From the firstborn of Pharaoh sitting on his throne, to the firstborn of the maidservant at her grinding stone, to the firstborn of the cattle in the field. Every firstborn will die. But for the Hebrews there is an instruction. Take a lamb, a perfect lamb, slaughter it at twilight. Take its blood, brush it on the doorposts and the lintel of your house. Stay inside, eat the lamb. Wait for morning. The Hebrew word for what happens next is passach. It means he will pass over. Where the blood is on the door, the destroyer will not enter. At midnight, he passes through Egypt. And now I want you to come back with me, back to the villa from the very beginning, the painted ceiling, the blue lotus and gold reeds, the oil lamp that the father blew out weeks ago, the boy in the new linen shirt. That boy is on the list. I am not going to describe what the father sees when he walks into that room at midnight. You already know what he sees. Every parent watching this video already knows. The text of Exodus simply says that there was a great cry in Egypt, because there was not a house where one was not dead. And here is the part of this story that has stopped me in my tracks for years. The plague that finally broke Pharaoh was not the plague that destroyed his river, or his crops, or his livestock, or his economy, or his priesthood, or even his son. The plague that broke Pharaoh was the plague that came for his son, because God is not interested in humiliating Egypt. God is going for the heart. He is asking Pharaoh, and he is asking every empire that has ever stood after Egypt, and he is asking you sitting here watching this. The same question he has always been asking. What do you love more than me? And every parent watching this video already knows the answer is not always God. We say it is, but the moment we picture the bed of our own child empty in the dark, we know what owns us. That is the question the 10th plague is really asking. So before you close this video, 3 things I want you to take with you. The first is the truth about the plagues themselves. The 10 plagues of Egypt were not chaos. They were not random punishments. They were not God losing his temper. They were a courtroom verdict, delivered in 10 precise rulings, against 10 named gods, in front of the entire ancient world. Hapi, Heqet, Geb, Kepri, Hathor, Sekhmet, Nut, Sennahem, Ra, and finally Pharaoh himself. Yahweh did not stutter. He named his defendants, and he convicted every one of them. The second is what this means for you. Watching this in a world that does not have temples to Hapi or shrines to Heqet anymore. Every empire builds its own pantheon. Ours has different names. The god of money, the god of power, the god of being noticed, the god of being right, the god of being safe. Every culture that has ever told you to bow to anything other than the living God will be exposed the same way Egypt was. One strike at a time, in slow motion, until everything you trusted to save you is lying on the ground, and the only voice left standing is the voice that was speaking the whole time. And the third is the one I cannot get out of my head. The Hebrew families in Goshen were not saved because they were better. They were not saved because they were more religious. They were not saved because they had earned it. They were saved for one reason. They were saved because they were under the blood of a lamb. 1500 years later, in that same region of the world, another lamb walked toward another doorway. He was called the Lamb of God. He was killed at the same time of year. His blood was placed above a doorway too. Only this doorway was made of wood and shaped like a cross. And the Apostle John, watching it happen, said that not one of his bones was broken, which is exactly what the law required of the Passover lamb. The doorway in Egypt was a picture. The cross was the fulfillment. The destroyer is still passing through, and there is still only one blood that turns him away. Now I want to hear from you. Which of the 10 plagues, now that you know which god it was striking, hit you the hardest? Was it Heqet, the goddess of fertility drowning in her own frogs? Was it Ra, the supreme god of Egypt, going dark for 3 days? Or was it the 10th, the moment the divine line of Pharaoh ended at midnight? Tell me below. I read every comment. Yahweh is still in the courtroom, and every false god you have ever bowed to is still on trial.